So our next SHETalk is a fireside chat, and for some reason I feel like we should have a little mini fireplace up here, a little crackling fire. Maybe you can put it on your cell phone. But the fireside chat is going to be with Desiree Patno, CEO and President of Women in the Housing and Real Estate Ecosystem, advisor of Amicus Brain Innovations, Inc., chairman of the NDILC, and CSO of Zulu Time. Desiree will be joined by Courtney, president of Zulu Time, founder of 2020 Vet, U.S. Army Aviation, and major NATO gender advisor. Erica is a U.S. Army veteran, served in 14 years in active duty in various positions, including military police, scout helicopter pilot, and paratrooper. And I can tell you one thing for sure, when these women talk, I listen.
Good morning. Does this work? Fantastic. Do a little exercise for me. Can everybody stand up that can stand up? Thank you. And I want you guys to do 20 circles at a brisk pace. So just start turning around briskly, 20 times. And then when you're done with your 20, I want you to find your seat quickly and sit down. So keep turning, quicker. Sweet. This is just for my humor, by the way. Yes. All right, awesome. Great. Fantastic. I don't know what number you're on, but you're doing awesome. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The point of this is, not all of you, but I'm guessing some of you felt a little disoriented, right? Like, where's my seat? I turned around, I'm a little dizzy, I'm a little out of sorts, and where's my home? Where's my seat? This is the premise behind Zulu Time. Does anybody in this room know what Zulu Time means? Chitra? All right. Any veterans in the room? Yes. Stand up, please. Awesome. What branch did you serve? Navy. For how many years?
5 years active and 3 years inactive, so total 8 years.
Okay, fantastic. Do you know what Zulu Time is? Kind of? Okay. Let me tell you what Zulu Time is. I know it's killing you guys. You need to know this. So when you deploy, you don't work on East Coast time, you don't work on local time, you don't work on Pacific time. You fall under something called Zulu Time. And when you get to Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever you may be, you're looking at this clock and you're like, what the hell time is it? I'm so confused. Is it day? Is it night? You know, you're just working. And then you get used to Zulu Time. After a couple weeks of being wherever you are in the world, this is the time, this is what you're calibrated on. And so you serve your time, and you come home, and now you're back on normal time. Again, you're confused, you're like, oh my gosh, where's Zulu Time? I'm out of sorts. And this is sort of why you guys spun around. This is really what veterans face or active duty when they come back from a deployment. When they leave or they come home, they are out of sorts, they're not real sure where to land, and they're confused. So it takes a little time to get back on normal time. So this is the premise of Zulu Time. I will, I'll get there. I'll get there. All right. Oh yeah, okay. You know, veterans, we like to throw up in our mouth when we talk about ourselves. We're not taught that. It is not our culture to talk about ourselves, but it's important. I've been out for a long time. It's especially important for women veterans to talk about themselves because these stories need to be told. You guys have heard my background. I don't really need to go into it, but what's important here is when I speak to groups, especially when we're having women speakers that are veterans, we need to have pictures of them serving behind what you see here, because this is what society sees, and this is not what society thinks of when they think of a soldier or a veteran. But guess what, boys? 15% of us are. So I was the first group of women to be a scout helicopter pilot, cavalry, the last of all airframes in any service to allow women. Think horseback, reconnaissance, security missions, the very founding of the Army. That's what I did, except in a helicopter. Yeah. All right, so I give our country an F on how we are dealing with our veterans. For those of you that were there last night, I'm going to reiterate the point that we have a problem in our country. This problem is not getting any better. The data is not looking any better in terms of the high rates of everything, which I'll get into in our community. So I'm going to just keep moving on here. So we have this thing that I like to call a military-civilian cultural divide. And there's several reasons. We can look at the data, but I always like to know why. Like, why are we having these problems? What are the solutions? Are there solutions? And really, what's going on in the psyche of our veterans? And why does this matter to you guys? Well, before I start going down the deep, dark path of all the problems, if we can get veterans to understand the road that they're going to take during this confusing time, recognize the hurdles, but also know that if you can get them through it, veterans are 2 to 3 times as likely to volunteer in their communities, make their communities safer. In terms of entrepreneurship, 40% of us are going into business for ourselves as opposed to 10% in Vietnam. We are contributing a mass amount to the GDP. We are twice as likely to outperform our civilian counterparts as business owners because we have skill sets that we've learned in the military, like mission focus, teamwork, integrity, right? We're gonna get it done, and we're gonna get it done well for our customers. So when you look at how we are handling this situation, it's very reactive. How do we become proactive so we don't have a social burden, and veterans do not want a handout, they want a hand up? So let's understand why this is happening. Clearly, decades of war. We've spent billions of dollars, and we've lost thousands of lives, and I'm not sure we're any further ahead now than we were when we started after 9/11. Completely overwhelmed, multiple deployments, et cetera. But what I wanted to point out to you is we generalize veterans as PTSD, TBI, they're kind of messed up, but really it's about 10 to 15% that really suffer these kinds of really deep, dark kinds of issues. The majority of veterans assimilate back into society quite nicely, and most of them are gonna be your customers. We're buying a lot of houses, we're going into business for ourselves. There's a lot of reasons to sort of pay attention to understand, hey, they're asking for capital for businesses. They're asking for loans for homes. We've got a huge homeless problem, right? They're aging. We've got a ton of younger ones coming up. The way that we treat them when they get out is, thank you so much for your service. Go work for corporate America, and here's how to write a resume, and here's how to dress. And they're like, what? Really? Okay. So then they get out, and finding a job takes a lot longer than they expected. And then when they find a job, they're plugged into corporate America, where half of them quit by year 1, and by year 2, we're at about 75% quit. And now we're within this 3-year gap, this safety net. And if we do not catch them and we do not give them alternatives to, hey, you know what? Why don't you look at going into a government job for military security operations with the UN or NATO? Or, hey, why don't you look at working in nonprofits? Or, why don't you serve on a board or something other than go work for Boeing? It's not working, but that is continually what we are pushing. Veterans really lack a sense of belonging. Half of us do not move back to the place that they left. So they are brand new in a community. They want to establish relationships. They just don't quite know how. So that's partly on the veteran, and it's partly on our civilian counterparts. The veteran, again, is not taught to talk about themselves and boast about their accomplishments. How do they speak it in a way that is understandable to the person on the other end, and with confidence, and in a way that doesn't, again, make them want to throw up in their mouth when they talk about themselves, because it's antithetical to what we're taught. The suck it up, we call this FIDO, fuck it, drive on. That is what we're taught. Suck it up, right? Do not show vulnerability and figure this out. But it's not easy for them to figure out, and they don't know how to talk to their family, and they don't know how to talk to their friends. But who they know how to talk to is other veterans, because we give them tough love. We will sit them down and be brutally honest with them, and we will get them in the right direction. So we are seriously missing the peer-to-peer piece in this. Clearly, there's a ton of bias in the way that people view veterans. It's like, yes, thank you for your service. I don't understand you, and then the veteran doesn't understand the other person, and then they withdraw. It's a vicious cycle. All right, I call this the invisible veteran since here we are a bunch of women. So you're looking at an invisible veteran. For years and years and years, I got involved with veteran groups, and there were very few women. And I'm like, what's going on with this? And I realized very quickly that I got tired of going to all these male veteran events that was like going to a frat boy party. I don't want to go out to strip clubs. I don't want to get hammered. You know, that stuff happened in the military. We're done with it. You know, but when you get other women veterans together, that's exciting because it's a completely different vibe. So you can look at these statistics. I mean, generally the general public does not recognize females as veterans. If I'm sitting next to a male that was a paper pusher and I'm the combat arms person, he will be seen as a warrior. I will not. This is just the bias that we face, which is one more bias that we as women, you know, have to overcome. So over time, looking at the data, we have to approach this holistically. And this is where Zulu time comes in. And this is where Desiree and I had kind of said, hey, let's look at the data. Let's try to figure out how to solve this problem. And it's not going to be at a DC level. When a veteran gets out, again, there are thousands and thousands of organizations that are dedicated to help veterans. It's overwhelming for them. They do not know who to go to. They do not know who's good. They pull back, and a lot of it is pointing them to other states, especially DC. But what do they have in their own local community that's been vetted in terms of everything from finance to education to employment to mental health, professional development, personal family development? What is out there? And LA has a great plethora of resources, but who is bringing that together and who is watching? So we like to bucket it into 4 categories. Veterans need connection, they need some kind of shelter, they need some kind of career, finance, and you've got the mental health piece. I'm gonna just go right through this very quickly, but what is needed is grassroots approaches. Someone who can touch someone in their own community, where the community has a place to outreach to the veterans in their community. Remember, less tax burden, less social burden, safer communities, people who are going to volunteer in the community, they are assets. But how do you get them involved in the community? How do you let them feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves? All right, so shelter, you know, a lot of them, most of them are homeless because they suffer PTSD or TBI or addictions, depression, and this all leads to why we have such a problem with shelter. Career development, we are probably the most educated force we've ever had in the history. You know, most of us have master's degrees. We've got tons of technical training. I don't necessarily think we need a ton of education, but that's a great transition for most. That's what I did. I got out and I'm like, what do I do now? This is a strange, crazy world. I got a master's degree, learned the language of business, and that gave me a little more confidence to navigate. But what universities are in the area that we can point them to? What technical skills are there? And we should be giving them options. Hey, veterans, and hey, women veterans, we are running and winning office more than ever. Like, women veterans do not have to prove that they're tough enough to hang in a male political environment. That's kind of a given. So women veterans are winning, yay. We should give them that seed, right? Run for office, local, state, national. Hey, you know what? Why don't you continue to serve in the reserves? That's what I do. I'm still in the reserves. I'll get to that later, but I had a break in service and recognized that there were women that were not being taught by other women, and I'm like, where are the women behind me? I thought I passed this torch. Now I'm at the Pentagon, and now I'm trying to make bigger change. Civil society, you know, there's something to be said again about their personal branding. We don't need to teach them to write a resume. We need to teach them to tell their story in an impactful way in which they're confident speaking to. The health, the mental, physical, and spiritual, you can't just treat PTSD or TBI or these other things without looking, again, at the whole person. We've got veterans that run the gamut of obesity, and you name it. Our rates are much higher than the normal population. All right, so Zulu time, what do we do? You can look at that, but essentially we came together and said, again, grassroots approach, make this run by veterans, for veterans, have trained counselors in this veteran center that are working with veterans within and can point them to the right resources, can mentor them. Remember, veteran to veteran, peer to peer, As I said last night, not your veteran, not your grandfather's VFW. We need something that's a coffee house feel. We need a designed technology center within this center that I'll show you what it looks like, that really speaks to something that is customized and pointing them in directions based on the 4 caveats I explained to you earlier. So when you walk in, this is a very comfortable feel. They can get away from their family, they can get away from their workmates, they can get away from whatever it is and be around other veterans and talk story. And through that, we can figure out where are you and where do you need to be, because that's where the tough love is gonna come in. And that's we're gonna be able to say, we've bridged this divide. Here's how we did it. Here's how you can do it. This is so necessary, and we are not getting the younger generation, which are suffering way more so than our older generation, to even step foot in any of these VA centers or any of these American Legions or VFWs. It's not our thing. I'm an Xer, I'm in between. I'm not the old, but I'm not the young, so I can kind of see both. And I so appreciate the Vietnam vets because they were treated like crap and they paved the way for us and made it easier for us, and now it's my generation's turn to make it better for them. All right, so here's the veteran triage, personal, professional, and rehabilitation. This is a lot of stuff. Take this in, but here's some of the areas that we're looking at connecting the veteran in a local community with. Started here in LA, scale this, and give them a place of a non-threatening, non-sterile, very comfortable environment where they can ask and seek for help. This is the vision that we're talking about. So you walk in, we validate and verify that you're a veteran, and I'm gonna just walk over here, and I'm sorry for the camera. I know you marketing people are gonna get annoyed here, but you walk in, right, you check in, and then you've got a chill out place. You're watching TV, you're watching a game. All this collaborative seating can be moved out for events. You've got an open area like a gym where you can have people doing yoga and dog treatments and all these things that are working with different pockets of veterans. You've got things in the back where if someone really needs more structured help, they can have privacy, and you can have a therapist in there working with the veterans, massage treatments, you name it. All of these great things can come together in one spot. The technology center, a place for people just to sleep if they're suffering from anger issues. Go, get away from your family, have a place to just chill out and lay your head for a while. And and you guys are in real estate, had great ideas about we should work with local hotels and get beds, just so, again, they can get away from whatever it is they're trying to escape. And just, again, create a safe space that's modern and comfortable, and they have access quietly to resources. And then if they would like, then they can start communicating with the rest of the people within the center. So that's Zulu time in a nutshell. All right, I'm gonna jump right into this. I'll do this for 4 minutes, Desiree. She wanted me to talk a little bit about, this is a heavy topic. Okay, so besides Zulu time, I always say, ladies, get yourself in a position of influence. Well, now I'm working in the Pentagon in a uniform, working directly for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff on women, peace, and security. And that is humbling, and I'm honored, and I'm just amazed that I'm in a position to be able to influence change, which we're doing right now. So, as of a couple months ago, long story short, the law passed the Women, Peace, and Security Act in 2017, which mandated the executive branch, the president, to come up with a women, peace, and security strategy. And so he said, all right, 4 agencies, Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, and USAID, you all have equities in this Women, Peace, and Security national plan, and you're all gonna create this giant plan that incorporates a gender perspective into all of your policy, all of your procedure, and DoD, all of your training. Where did this originate from? The United Nations back in 2000, everybody finally came together, the world, and they said, we recognize that women are disproportionately affected by conflict and by disaster, much more so than men. We think of the guys with guns as the ones that are dying, not necessarily true. About 80% of the casualties, depending on what country we're talking about, are generally women and children. And the world said, we need to recognize this and we need to come up with United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. And since then, you've got all of these other resolutions that have recognized men, because men are also disenfranchised men dealing with things like many atrocities and genocide, et cetera, in Africa and many other nations. So from that, 2000, the United States created a National Action Plan in 2013. Finally, the law was passed in 2017. The president says, all you guys need to figure this crap out. How are we going to do this? And it's me and one other woman in the Pentagon creating a giant plan of roles and responsibilities, equities, and budget for the entire Department of Defense. I will not see this in my time, 5 years from now. The hope is that a gender perspective is incorporated into all military operations. So women, peace, and security really encapsulates a lot of the things that we talk about in the business world, et cetera. Underrepresentation, you're talking about human rights and biases, et cetera. And what we are aiming at is preventing, protecting, and women's participation, basically meaningful participation, at least 30% of women at a table in positions of authority, not just for numbers' sake, as defined by the UN. When we talk about a gender perspective, really what that means is from a tactical level, you have guys out there on patrol, they're actually paying attention to the women and children in the communities, and they are incorporating them into the conversations because women, essentially, I don't care what country you're from, care about similar things. We want safe and secure homes and communities. We want health care and good education for our kids. We don't want conflict. So we all have this in common. And so you get women to the table, peace treaties will last 3 times as long, and the data shows overwhelmingly that results are way better when you have at least that 30% at the table making decisions for their community. And people will say, well, Erica, aren't we imposing our democratic kind of thinking onto other countries? And I say, fair point, but I've been to these countries and there are women always standing in the wayside waiting to have a seat at the table. I don't care what country you go into. And so if you plant that seed and let them know it's possible and you deserve a place at that seat, this is your community, that's when change happens. Okay, this is an Army slide. I just wanted to overwhelm you because I love, this is where I bridge. I like corporate because slides are pictures and it's not overwhelming. Army slides give me a headache, and this is I'm a reservist, so I can dance in both worlds, and they don't know what to make of me half the time, and I'm like, this is horrible! Make your slides, easy to read, and I'm just whatever, crazy reservist. But anyway, this is sort of a little bit of lines of efforts, and I am called a gender advisor. I was trained in Sweden by NATO, and what that means is I'm familiar with international policy and laws, and I advise our leadership on what that looks like, and again, how do we implement this gender perspective from guys looking at a tactical level, how many women are going through checkpoints, how many women are in the markets, how are you reporting that up to gender advisors takes that, and then they pass it up the chain, and now commanders have better situational awareness. We reduce our troops' risk, we reduce the risk to the women, children, and men in the communities, and we avoid blind spots. So when I pitch this, I don't pitch it in a humanitarian way to all of these generals because that's the way it's been done for a long time. Remember, I was cavalry. I can speak tactics all day to these guys, and they don't, again, know what to make of me, but I'm like, this is a strategic imperative. We are spending so much money trying to solve problems on the technology and the nuclear and all of these violent extremist organizations. This is a tool we have in our toolkit that is cheap and it's smart, and let's go back to basics, boys. So anyway, that is what I'm working on, privileged to work on it. I will stop talking. Desiree.
Wow.
It's not is it on? Yes. It's not about her stop talking, is that when I asked her to be a SHETalk, she says, only 10 minutes. I'm not going to do more than 10 minutes. Really?
We talk.
That's right. So, this is unbelievable. Let me ask, anyone in this room has anything even knew 10% of what you just said? Okay, 2. 30%? No, just kidding. You're both on the NDILC council, so that's cheating. Outside of the NDILC council. The power.
Well, I'm Tammy,
And Tammy has family that's in the military. The power of knowledge is what we're here today, to understand. If you think the theme of this event was all about connecting, understanding, and not walking away because you don't understand what's going on. And the biggest takeaway that I had from everything you said was the fact is that running to, understanding, and engaging, right? And think about it. If we have these women leaders coming out of the military, the statistics that you said about how great they are at starting business, how much they give 150% and involved, how many would die? And we just heard Chris about leadership and being involved and having on the company would want to have a women veteran as your source to come in to working for your company, right? Then from there, it goes into the power of connecting to the community and going, and stat of 50% of them not even going home, going to a place they've never been before. How is, and I gotta look at you and say, the thought that you started this 5 or 6 years ago and shelved it, you can bring it to the table, but you're still one of them. You're still, the emotion, I see it in you. There's moments that you just take off 150 miles an hour and then you get quiet. How do you adjust to that? How do you deal with that? How do we better help deal with that? Being very honest.
Just how to deal with veterans, or
How to deal with, the fact is, the question I'm asking is that I want to help understand, if I go ask and talk to this is a general question, not just in the veteran world, is that we all struggle on how to, I know I do personally myself, on if someone has someone who passes, someone who's very ill, someone who's dealing with, so much is going on in the world right now, and you bring up the veteran piece in this in an incredible way that magnifies it tenfold. How do you help deal with this in a very open way that would be beneficial to all of us? I'd love your takeaway on that.
well, I mean, it's just planting the seed and educating people on the power of veterans, and don't look at them like they're disabled, but they're very able, and they do suffer, things in their life like many people. And how do you approach that? And every community suffers, their own demons. You really can't expect to understand how to solve a problem if you're not from that culture or that community. So you have to bring in people. It's like working in native, tribal lands. You're not going to make decisions for them. You're going to bring in the community and figure out, what their needs are. So it's no different, I think, in this community.
I think would be very helpful is what is the best approach that we could solve a solution to help understand, how do we approach or we see something that we in ourselves don't know how to understand? Like, for example, if I see a veteran, I see them in their outfit. I remember hearing Colin Powell.
Uniform.
Yeah, and he said the first thing he says, when you see a veteran, walk up and you're at Starbucks or wherever you're at, I got that. I'll take care of his bill. This is the nicest way to say thank you for your service. Something simple like that. Teach us all. Give us something that would help us better understand how we approach and say something without feeling cliche or cheesy.
I'll speak for a lot of veterans. We appreciate when people come up and say, hey, thank you for your service, but it always makes us feel a little awkward, right? It makes us feel good that people are at least thinking positively of the service, whatever it was that you did. But we need more than that. We need, I think, the civilian populace to be a little bit more patient, and understand, I think, some of the hurdles that veterans are going through, this cultural divide, and that this is mutual, and take the time to kind of really understand where are you coming from. Knowing your people goes back to leadership. What skills do you really bring, or how can I help you in a meaningful way? But you can't get there unless you sort of know where they came from. And if they start throwing a bunch of acronyms out and a language that you don't understand, then you just got to be like, help me understand what that 50 acronyms means that you just said to me, right? And then help them be able to communicate more effectively, which will give them confidence. And by giving them confidence and a purpose, you save their lives.
I think that's perfect, confidence and purpose. Because when you're given a mission or something to do, there's an end game. There's a reason. I'm speechless. We talk about suicide rates, and a statistic that still haunts me. You said that there's more suicide in non-combat veterans than there are in combat veterans. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. The majority of suicides are actually from non-combat veterans. Maybe 20% of the force is deployed. And I think that there is a stigmatism. If you come back from serving after 4, 5, 6 years and you can't say, yeah, I was in Afghanistan, or I was in Iraq, or I was in the Gulf War, they're somehow looked at like they're less of a soldier. But they were out there training with us. They were part of the mission, for sure. And every time I strapped in a helicopter, whether I'm deployed or not, it was dangerous. Every time these guys get in a tank or whatever it is that they do, you're putting your lives and your soldiers' lives at risk. A lot of times they're responding to natural disasters. We don't think about that, but with the climate the way it is, the military has said, hey, yeah, we understand climate change is a real thing. And this is causing refugees, and this is causing conflict and war, and we are having to respond all over the world to react to these things. And that people will take back, even if they're gone in Africa for Ebola or whatever it may be. They may be suffering from something, but it's not what you would think in a typical context of, a conflict zone. So, at home, we always say in the Army, it's like you may win the battle, but this is a war. This is a war to save national treasures, and this is a long haul, and we have to do it correctly. So we might have a little win here. You might have a mental health professional that did a little something for a veteran, but there's 4 other areas that need to be addressed. So we need to win the war.
It's a constant every day. When you get something that is in your body, when you get cancer, let's say, or chronic illness or something, it's an always everyday thing that you have to address. And I believe that once you get sick, you have issues, every day you're awake. Life itself, aging, is something that we have to work on and to improve ourselves. I think as a society, we have to improve what it's like to be in your shoes. No, we'll never, can fully understand it, but the more we understand, and I believe that's the whole purpose. I mean, we asked Erica a year and a half ago, we were running all her life of being as a veteran, so I was so honored that I said, I can't just skim this through and narrow it down to 6 pages, and we're up to, 24 or 30 pages now, over the last year and a half. To understand this means you have to really take the time, I think as corporations, I think as nonprofits and as human beings that are in the civilian life. You mentioned the fact that I'm associated with, my father spent 55 years as a civil servant at Point Mugu, Point Hueneme, and never served in the military, but I was around military my entire life during this time of on this face of the earth. And I can say the respect that I got, the information I got, the collaboration was always there. And even though I was a woman at the time, a little girl going through, I'm still a woman, going through, I haven't changed, okay. The Blue Angels, they took it upon me to make sure that I understood the flight, the aircraft, and what was being done. So it kept me to be a leader, and I thank them for being so strong. For you, if I remember correctly, you started as enlisted, then you went into the officer, and everything you did was you had to reprove yourself. And here you're coming out reproving yourself. And I've seen a change in you literally in the last, I would say, year of the demands of what's being done ahead. And we're honored, and I'm honored to be part of the Zulu time. No shaking your head. To be able to spread your passion, your experience, and your conviction to change the narrative for veterans, right? And all of us in this room need to make sure that this information that we have included in the NAWRB report and we've included in that we follow what is being done here, because the more we can disseminate this throughout not only the United States, but globally, is here we have, you know, the U.S. Virgin Islands in the room, we have the government officials, but everyone has a responsibility to take everything that Erica just said and make sure you tell 10 more people and 10 more people and 10 more people, because we need to understand what they sacrifice, not only their time, but their mental growth and what they can give back to the community, because CNN ran a special, there was an award last year where the guy mobilized 88,000 military, I'm sorry? I think it could have been, to where natural disaster was happening. He was able to get 88,000 veterans out from, if they were not, they were retired, to come back into service. And a lot of them were, didn't have jobs, were not, you know, they were in their little world and they weren't society adjusted well. And they came out and they were just killing it. And everyone's like, how did you get them to get? They said, we understand the war, we understand the combat, and time is of the essence. And they put it online. They'd save hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of individuals from the natural disasters. I thought of you. It was like, oh my gosh, this is Erica in her prime going out there just going it. So I'm just, no, serious. So what would be the greatest takeaway we could take away from all this, from your perspective?
I just appreciate you guys listening. You know, I know it's a heavy topic, but if you are dealing with someone who you can tell is just awkward socially, they're sort of removing themselves, and you know, you could tell they're just sort of not fitting in, and maybe they really want to have relationships, they just don't know how. Just, again, be patient, kind of get to know their story, see how you can help shape that narrative, and point them in the right direction. You know, if you know organizations that are doing well in your community, they need something to do, you know. Rubicon is a great example. That's very sort of military-driven, do something good. You know, veterans want to continue to volunteer in some capacity. And I have to this last point here. So see these pins on my suit, my wings and my jump wings? I used to go to events and all the guys would be like, yeah, and they'd have their Marine stuff on or whatever in their pins. And I'm like, that's so stupid, right? And the VFW guys would be walking around with their 100 pins on their hats. And I'm like, we're not in the military anymore. Like, do we have to like advertise this stuff? And then over time, I'm like, you know what? I'm a woman and I'm right there with you boys. So check it out, gents, right? You're not the only game in town, so.
And we're way over time, I
own
know. But real quick, how do we get involved? And what's the next steps for Zulu Time?
Anybody who wants to help Desiree and I, right now we're trying to find exactly the location that we would like to start this center, get it working, get it veteran run, have it organic, bring in the community, and then again, scale that up. We're gonna be looking for help, so you know where to find us.
Yeah. Thank you for all that.